Sentire Media.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy, the podcast that takes you through everything you need to know about making Italy your home. I'm Samantha Wilson, and today we're talking about a topic that I get questions about all the time. Questions like, what happens if I'm married to an Italian citizen and we want to move to Italy? Or, what happens if I'm married to an Italian citizen and they do not want to move to Italy? What can I do? What are your options? What are your rights? And what are your responsibilities? You see, moving to Italy as a spouse of an Italian citizen brings unique privileges, but it also comes with specific legal steps, milestones, and even potential challenges. Today, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about moving to Italy as the spouse of an Italian citizen. We'll cover the legal process, what happens in the event of a divorce or death, and what it takes to eventually become an Italian citizen yourself. Whether you are married or considering it, this episode will help you understand your pathway forward to a new life in Italy. I'm Samantha Wilson, Chief Dream Maker at smartmoveitaly.com, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show where each week I take you behind the scenes of what it's really like to move to Italy, introduce you to some fascinating people, answer your questions, and show you how starting a new life in Bel Paese is possible for you. Okay, well, welcome back. If you are married to an Italian, somebody with pasta sauce running through their veins, or you're planning on it with the intention of moving and living abroad, living here in Italy, I have some pretty good news for you. Unlike other countries where getting spousal rights to live with that citizen, sometimes it can be pretty long and expensive and very, very confusing, Italy, for once, is on the easier side of things if this is you. So perhaps this is because Italy is committed to family and keeping people together easier. I don't know, maybe that's the reason. And of course, Italian law recognizes the rights of foreign spouses, which make it easier to obtain a visa and residency to live here. So this is all really good news for you. Now, there is some confusion on what you need to do as a spouse of an Italian and what that process is to becoming legal in Italy if you want to live here full time. So let's start with determining your specific situation. I want to start with a scenario that maybe isn't as common, and that is that your Italian spouse is actually already living in Italy. So perhaps you came here, you fell in love, you did the whole romantic story, and you got married, but you head back to your home country to pack up and prepare to move and join your spouse here in Italy. Well, if this is the case, you do need to have a visa, and you do need to get this National D visa in the home country that you're in, your home country, before you arrive and join your spouse here in Italy. And every consulate has a few different things that you need to do in order to get that National D to join your spouse, but it's not all that complicated. However, you do need to do it in advance. But for today's episode, I want to focus on the more common way that people move here as a spouse of an Italian, and that's usually the spouse of a dual Italian citizen, where they're both, now you and your spouse are both living in your home countries, and together you want to arrive in Italy and start your new life here using the fact that your Italian spouse has the rights to live here without a visa. So if your Italian spouse is a dual citizen, or even just Italian and currently residing in your home country with you, and you both want to move and live here full time, it's perfectly fine. But you do need to follow very specific steps to ensure that you have all of the necessary documents in advance of arriving. Now, before we start to get into those specifics, I do want to remind you that this is Italy, and every comune, meaning the place where you're planning to live, the municipality, has their own spin or their own unique way of managing this process of immigration. Now, even though there are rules and laws that are meant to govern your experience and govern the process, your experience may be a little bit different from what I am going to explain. Now, it shouldn't be, because there are rules and there is a law. So make sure you follow the rules I'm telling you. But when you arrive here, if it becomes a little bit of a different process, that's okay. As long as you have all of the documents in order, you will be fine. Now, if you plan to move to Italy together, then the good news is that you, the non-Italian, do not need to have a visa in advance of arriving. And this is a big deal because getting a visa can take time and money, and it's quite frustrating of a process. But if you're married to an Italian, you have the right to live in Italy. In fact, the two of you can arrive together and begin the immigration process during the first 90 days of your stay. Now, this is really important to remember that you, the non-Italian, only has 90 days to stay in the Schengen region. And Italy, of course, is in the Schengen region. So there are some specific things that I recommend you do in advance of arriving, because once you get here, you only have 90 days to get a lot of things done. First, you should have secured a place to live before you arrive. And I know that a lot of people that make this plan, this dual citizen with a non-Italian spouse, they figure, well, I'll just come to Italy and I'll find a place to live once we're there. And I want to warn you of that because it is very difficult to find a rental in Italy. And because you only have 90 days to take care of a lot of the bureaucracy, a lot of the immigration piece, if you also need to find a place to live at first, it's very, very likely that you will eat up all of your 90 days just finding a place to live and getting a registered lease. And if you do go beyond that 90 days before you've started the immigration process, you will have to leave, and you'll have to leave for another full 90 days. So the very first thing you need to do is to secure a place to live. This is either a registered residential lease for at least 12 months, or of course, the deed of a property if you own a property. And make sure that the lease is in both of your names, both the Italian citizen as well as the non-Italian spouse. This will make things a lot easier for you. Now, the second thing that you need to do, and what a lot of people forget to do, is that we have to connect you together. We have to connect the Italian spouse with the non-Italian spouse legally. And this is through marriage. And your marriage needs to be already registered in AIRE. This is the database that Italians that live abroad must be registered in. Think of it like a census. And your marriage should be included in your file. So everything that you do as an Italian citizen living abroad, every major life event like marriage or a birth of a child, all of these things need to be registered in AIRE. And it's AIRE. That's the acronym, AIRE. And so you need to have your marriage registered in AIRE as well as registered at the comune that you have your birth certificate registered in. And you need to order an extract of that registration from AIRE for the application when you come to Italy. And you have to do this in advance. You will need this document in order to connect you legally to your spouse in Italy and allow your spouse to apply for a permit to stay. You should also take your original marriage license and have that translated and apostilled, which is a legalization of the document so that you can use that here in Italy. So this is a very important point. And a lot of people forget about AIRE and they haven't registered. It can take some time, so make sure if you haven't done it, log on. I'll put the links in the show notes. Log on to AIRE and start the process now so you have everything taken care of. Now, if you're not legally married, just common law, unfortunately, you will need to make it official before you can be classified as a spouse of an Italian and move to Italy. It can be a civil ceremony, doesn't have to be a big church ceremony, but it does need to be an official marriage in order to use it here in Italy. All right, so you have a place to live in advance. You have all of your documentation in order, which is your marriage certificate, translated, apostilled, and of course the extract from AIRE. What happens after you arrive? Well, there are specific steps that you need to go through. And the best way is to remember them this way, is understand that you, the non-Italian, can only stay in Italy for more than 90 days without a visa if your spouse is a registered resident of Italy. So you can only stay if your spouse is already living here. Therefore, the very first step that you will need to do together is your Italian spouse will need to register for their residency in Italy. And you do this at the anagrafe office in the comune that you are living in, because remember, you already have a place to stay, so you know where you are living. Now, the Italian will start with the registration of their residency. And again, you do that at the comune. And it can take just an hour or a couple of hours. Hopefully, it's Italy, so it might take a little bit longer. You will, of course, need your passport, and you will need the registered lease where you're living. And after about a couple of days, you will really officially be registered as a resident in Italy. However, there's still one more step that has to take place. And that is the police, the local municipal police, will have to come to your house and knock on the door and prove that you actually live there. And they have up to 45 days to complete this process. And although they may not ever attend your house, within that 45 days, they usually do. And if they do attend and you're not there, or they don't believe you actually live in that address, they can deregister you from your residency. So it's very important to complete this check. Now, in some comune, as soon as you, the Italian, registers their residency, as long as you've registered your residency within a day or so, you essentially are registered. You're already a resident. The check is to confirm you're living in the home that you're living. And there is a risk, of course, if you're not there, that they'll deregister you. But of course, if you're living there, this isn't a problem. So after a couple of days, what'll happen is you'll get a receipt from the anagraphy office. In some comune, as soon as the Italian registers their residency, they will receive a receipt. And typically this will take a couple of days after you have gone in and registered. But this receipt is what the spouse, the non-Italian spouse, will use to begin the process of applying for a permesso di soggiorno. Now, in some cases, you may have to wait until after that 45-day police check in order to be completed before your spouse can begin the process. In law, really, you are registered already after a couple of days of going into the anagraphy office. But as I said, some comune will respond in a different way, and you might need to wait. And this is why you need your full 90 days, because it's possible you might need to wait at least 45 days or more to complete the process before the non-Italian spouse can start to register for their permesso. In any case, it's so important that you do not lose the receipt that you get from the anagraphy office, the proof of your registration. Take a picture of it, save it on your phone, and file it away somewhere very safe, the original, because you will need this many times, actually, not just at the time of registering for residency and for the permesso di soggiorno, but later on as well. It's an important document to have. Once the registration is complete, let's say you're allowed to do it after a few days or you wait for the 45-day check, then the spouse, so the non-Italian, can now begin the process of applying for their permesso di soggiorno. This means that you have to go through the process, and this will take some time. It's not going to be as fast as the residency, but it is a process that you have to go through, and you must start this process within 90 days of arrival in the Schengen zone. Schengen zone. So if you decide when you're moving, you're going to start in France, for example, and take a couple weeks vacation before you head down to Italy to start this process, you've used up 2 weeks of your 90 days because you're all in the Schengen. So this is super important. You must ensure that you have 90 days in your stay in order to apply for this permesso di soggiorno. And if you have stopped in another Schengen country before arriving to Italy, as soon as you get to Italy, you must, within 8 days, make a declaration of presence. This way, Italy will know when you actually arrived. Now, let's get back to applying for the permesso di soggiorno. This is done through the post office, and you have to go first to the post office, just your local post office, and ask for a kit. Now, I know it's kind of a weird word. It really isn't a kit. It's just an envelope with some bunch of papers in it, but they call it a kit. So you'll ask for the kit for the permesso di soggiorno, and you will get that at the sportello window, which is just a counter, and it'll say sportello inside the post office. So you go in there ahead, and you ask for the kit, you take the envelope, and you leave. And then you go back home and you start to fill out the numerous pages in the application form. You'll need to include copies of your passport, your spouse's residency certificate, like I told you about, that little receipt. You'll also need your marriage extract from AIRE. You'll need photos. You'll need to get a little tax stamp. And all of this stuff together, you will go back to the post office and apply for your permesso di soggiorno, remember, still within the 90 days of your arrival. They will then check the documents, give you a receipt with the date and time of when you now need to go to the immigration office, which is at the questura, the main police State Department immigration office. This is where you'll finish the process. They will take your photos and your fingerprints. Now, the time frame between when you apply for your permesso di soggiorno and when you actually go to the questura can be several months, sometimes up to a year. It can take a really long time. They are getting better right now at catching up, but it does take a long time. And one thing to keep in mind is while you are waiting for this permesso di soggiorno from the questura, you cannot travel in other Schengen zones. So you're restricted only to Italy. Now, of course, you can travel outside of Italy. You can fly directly out of the Schengen into the UK or back to your home country, but you cannot travel or stop on a layover in any other Schengen country until you have this permesso. Once you get your permesso di soggiorno, this is your legal authority to stay in Italy. But in the interim, the receipt that you're getting when you first apply at the post office, guard this one with your life, my friends. Take a picture of it. Keep it someplace super safe because you will need this to prove your legal authority to be in Italy, especially if you are traveling. You will need this to show why you're still here over 90 days. Now, eventually you will complete the process of the permesso di soggiorno at the police department, and hopefully at that time they will give you a 5-year carta di soggiorno. This is different, a little bit different. It's mainly used for spouses of Italians or Europeans, and it's good for 5 years. But in a lot of cases now, we are seeing that local questura are only giving permesso di soggiornos for 1 year, not for 5. They're giving the first year only for 1 year, and then when you go to renew it after that first year, then they will give you the 5-year carta di soggiorno. So don't be alarmed if it is only a year. You'll just go back and renew, and you will get the 5-year after that. And then, my friends, you are done. Well, almost done. Remember, Italy loves their bureaucracy, so there's still a little bit more you have to do eventually. Now, once you've obtained this permit, you have the legal right to live in Italy, and you'll have access to many of the same rights as an Italian citizen. Really, the next step after your permesso is to register for residency, just like your spouse did at the very beginning. But once you have all of this, you will be able to work. You'll be able to enroll in Italy's public healthcare system for free, by the way, if you are the spouse of an Italian. And you'll even be able to access educational benefits if you decide to study. However, remember that residency in Italy also comes with certain responsibilities, such as compliance with Italian tax laws or your driver's license. Remember, after 12 months of legal residency, your foreign license will not be valid in Italy, so you'll have to take an Italian driver's license. So be mindful of these things that trigger after you become a residency in Italy. You also will not be able to travel freely to other Schengen countries, but are still restricted to the 90 days out of a 180-day period, and this is often misunderstood. Just because your Italian spouse can travel around freely because they have a European passport, you do not. You will only have permission to be in Italy for more than 90 days because your spouse is an Italian resident. Otherwise, if you want to travel to other Schengen countries, be mindful that you are still restricted to 90 days out of a 180-day period, just like you are now. Also, your right to stay in Italy is directly connected to your spouse. So remember, in marriage, for better, for worse, also in Italy, you are connected. If your spouse cancels their residency, then your permesso will also be canceled. So it isn't possible for you to have a residency in Italy, the non-Italian, to have a residency in Italy without the residency of the Italian spouse. But what you want to work towards is either permanent residency or citizenship. This will give you more independence. And what that is permanent residency is status that you can get after 5 years of uninterrupted residency in Italy. And as the spouse of an Italian citizen, you are eligible for permanent residency status. And this is an important milestone because permanent residency allows you to stay indefinitely. It's actually good for 10 years, but it just continues to be renewable. So this is something that you really should be working towards. Once you have your residency in Italy, then you'll start counting 5 years from then, you can apply for permanent status. Even better, you can apply for Italian citizenship if you're married to an Italian. And the rules are after 2 years of marriage here when you're living in Italy, you can apply for Italian citizenship, or 3 years if you haven't been living in Italy. In most cases, or many cases, you will be already eligible to apply for Italian citizenship through marriage. However, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute because it can take some time, and there are specific requirements that you need. And to get either one of these things, citizenship or permanent status, is really good for you because if circumstances change for you, you'll be covered. Now, of course, life can be unpredictable and sometimes things don't really go as planned. So let's take a look at what happens if your Italian spouse, either you separate, you divorce, or the unthinkable happens and they pass away. If you get divorced or separated from your Italian spouse, your residency status can become a little bit more complicated, especially if you don't have permanent status yet. In general, if you are already a permanent resident, that's that one you get after 5 years, you are safe to remain in Italy. However, if you are still on this initial residency permit for family reasons because you're married to an Italian resident, you may need to reapply for a different type of permesso di soggiorno in Italy. So in other words, you need to try to convert this permesso that you have as the spouse of an Italian to something else. And it's not easy to do, my friends, at all. So always consider that if you have the chance to go ahead and get that 5-year permanent status. Now, Italian law does try to balance protecting the rights of foreign spouses while also upholding immigration policies, so you won't automatically lose the right to stay. But it is safe, and it's really a good idea to consult, obviously, with an immigration lawyer at that time if that happens and you are divorcing or separating, to make sure that you are protected if you want to stay in Italy. Now, on the other hand, if your Italian spouse passes away, Italian law is generally more lenient in this case. In most cases, you will be allowed to remain in Italy, especially if you've already established a life here and have connections within the community. If you were close to achieving permanent residency, that 5-year mark, or even citizenship at the time of your spouse's passing, you may be eligible to just continue the process based on the fact that you had already started it and your residency had been started prior to the death of your spouse. But let's talk about the citizenship for just a minute, because it is a big question that a lot of people have, a lot of spouses of Italians have. And it will give you that independence that you're looking for to travel around Schengen and also to be able to maybe stay in Italy separate from your spouse, not separating, but maybe you have different plans throughout your marriage. So if you're committed to making Italy your long-term home, then Italian citizenship probably is something that you're also considering. So let's break down the process, the requirements, and some of those key benefits to actually becoming an Italian citizenship through marriage. As I mentioned earlier, you are eligible to apply for Italian citizenship through marriage after only 3 years of marriage, if you're, of course, living outside of Italy. But if you move to Italy, that reduces down to 2 years. So if you've been married for 2 years and you're living in Italy as a resident, bingo, you can start to apply for Italian citizenship. And if you have children, then it's only 18 months. So it's not a long time to wait. However, this is the problem which most people face. Recently, Italy has put a requirement for language for spouses of Italians in order to apply for their citizenship, and it's a B1 level Italian language. You have to have the test done officially, and you have to pass a B1 level. And it can be a little bit tricky to meet for some people because that's about an advanced beginner's immediate level. It's very conversational, and it will take you some time to get that B1 level. And however, in my opinion, if you're moving to Italy anyway, you're going to be learning Italian. So if I were you, I would start working towards that B1 level as soon as possible so that you can apply for your citizenship. All right, so let's say you are ready to apply. You have your marriage license. You have been married for long enough. You also have your B1 certificate. So now it's time. Here's what you have to do. You can apply for your citizenship directly here in Italy, which is really great because you don't have to go back, obviously, to your home country. You can apply while you're living here. But again, you have to be aware that it can take a long time. There is a significant amount of documentation that you have to prove that you have that go along with the application. And the application can take up to 4 years now to get your citizenship. So this isn't a quick fix, my friends. Probably what'll happen is you will get your 5-year certificate, your 5-year long-term permit, permanent status. And as you're waiting for your citizenship to play out, you'll live with this permit of stay. And I do recommend that. I recommend that you come in here, get your 5-year carta di soggiorno. This is your initial permit that you're taking residency in Italy. After 5 years of legal residency, apply for your EU long-term permit, which you also need a language component for, by the way. And then during that time as well, you can be applying for your citizenship. So all of that time you will be protected and you'll have the same rights as your Italian spouse. Now, becoming an Italian citizen does come with a number of benefits as well. First, as I said earlier, you and your spouse will have the freedom of movement throughout the European Union, and all of your rights will be independent of your spouse. Of course, you can continue to receive the free health care that you had before, as long as you're a taxable resident of Italy, but you also have the right to vote and apply for certain jobs that are only available to Italian citizens. So there are definitely benefits to going that extra mile, waiting for all of the process to complete and getting that coveted red passport for yourself. All right, so let's recap. If you're married to an Italian citizen, Italian dual citizen even, and looking to move to Italy, you have some unique advantages that make the transition a lot easier and smoother for you. You will not need a visa in advance if you're moving together, but you will need to have one in advance if you're coming to join your spouse here. You will need to have all of your documents ready and a place to live before you jump on the plane because you only have 90 days to get the job done while you're here. Also, when you get the permesso di soggiorno for family reasons, you can live, work, and access all of the same things that your Italian spouse can. And after a few years, after 5 years, you can apply for permanent residency and then eventually citizenship. However, it's important to know what can happen if circumstances change. So remember, in case of a divorce or the death of your spouse, there can be some changes to your permesso. But in most cases, Italian law is relatively accommodating. And finally, if you are committed to a life in Italy, a future full-time life in Italy, citizenship is an achievable goal, and it comes with a ton of benefits, including the freedom to live across in any other European country, and of course, the ability to integrate into Italian society. So I hope that answers your questions. If you are the spouse of an Italian dual citizen, you are lucky, you do not need a visa, and you can start to pack up as soon as you're ready to go. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions, all left on our voicemail. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hi, Samantha. My name's Oriana. So this will be my first winter here in Italy, and I've heard how expensive gas can be. Do you think it would be more cost-effective to use the AC unit instead with the heating option?
Hello, Oriana. This is a really great question and super timely, actually, because we are now all turning our heat on in most parts of Italy. Actually, you might not know this, but in Italy, heat is regulated. The times that you can turn your heat on and off in the year are regulated. And because I live in Tuscany, as of November the 1st, we were all allowed to turn our heat on, which is quite nice. And, it does start to get a little bit cold. So you do have to consider the cost of energy here in Italy, which is one of the reasons that there's those restrictions in place. And by the way, if you do turn your heat on before the restrictions of your region kick in, you will pay more in your bill. So make sure that you don't do that. Now, back to your question about which way is easier, which way is more cost effective. I do recommend, yes, if you have, depends on the energy that you have in your house. Electricity, which will be the energy that you're using for your air conditioning unit. There's splits, really, so they have cool air in the summer, and then you can actually heat your room through forced air in the winter. A lot of people do use this if their space is quite small and they can just want to heat up the room quickly and keep it warm and turn it off when they're not around. This is a great way to conserve your energy for sure. Now, in some places, if you are dreaming of having a great big farmhouse in the middle of the country, please keep in mind that some heat sources can be extremely expensive, like GPL, which is a propane system that most big farmhouses will use. And it can be thousands and thousands of euros to use to keep your house warm in the wintertime. So it's very, very expensive. Some other really good cost-effective systems are pellet stoves. Those are those little tiny pellets. I always laugh and I always call them, they look like little rabbit poo, little pellets. They're actually often made by here in Italy, made by crushed seeds of olive pits and other things, but they burn really clean, and they also cost very little compared to just straight gas to heat your house. So you can take a look at the pellet systems as well. Many places have them now, especially larger places, because it is more cost effective. So to answer your question, yes, be very mindful of the time of year when you're turning your heat on. And if you can, if it works for you, it is always cheaper to use electricity than it is to use gas here in Italy.
Hi, Samantha. This is Stephanie. I'm just wondering, when you go to Italy to apply for citizenship and you get the residency permit, what options do you have in terms of working? I've read that you're able to turn your residency permit into a working permit as well. But I'm also looking at getting a visa, and I was looking at the digital nomad visa, but I understand that you probably can't work in or for an Italian company with that. So I'm just kind of trying to work out what people do when they are awaiting citizenship. Do they just not work, or what's the situation? Thanks so much.
Hello, Stephanie. I love your accent, by the way. Good question, and a popular question. When you arrive here to apply for citizenship directly in the comune that you're living in, you will get a permesso di soggiorno based on the fact that you are applying for citizenship. You do not need a visa to do that. You can come here and get that permesso. But that permesso is restrictive, and you are not typically permitted to work during your wait for your citizenship. However, you are correct. There are ways that you can convert this permesso for citizenship to a permesso for work, but it really will depend on what kind of work you're talking about, and the process will change. So do you want to find a job in Italy? Are you working for an Italian company, or are you going to be working remotely for perhaps the company that you're working for now in your home country? So it depends on what type of work you'll be doing. It is quite complicated, and it can take a lot of time. And this is the key point to remember, is that converting a permesso into a different type of a permesso can take many months, sometimes 6, 9, 12 months, even more. Depends if you need to get a nulla osta or some sort of clearance beforehand. And what happens is almost always you will get your citizenship recognized before that permit has ever been even converted, before the time runs out to get it converted. So often what you have to do is just wait. Now, depending on where you're working, if you have a specific situation where you can actually qualify to get a special letter to try to apply for a permesso and allow you to work sooner, it can be possible, but typically it'll never pan out in time for you to do it before you actually get your citizenship. In other words, what you can do, like you said, you can apply for a visa, let's say digital nomad visa, arrive on your digital nomad visa or any other visa for that matter, apply for your citizenship while you're here, and then still be able to work immediately, having all of the rights that you are wanting to have while you're getting your citizenship. I hope that helps.
Hi, Sam. My name is Taryn. I'm thinking about moving abroad, but don't know where. All I know is I don't want to live in the US anymore. What is Italy like? Is it easy to move there as an American? I look forward to your response. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and it's a good one. And I think moving abroad takes a lot of time and consideration. It won't happen quickly. Once you've decided to make the move, after evaluating what place is best for you, then you have to get into the process of getting a visa, finding a place to live, and organizing your place that you're living now to move and pack. So although it might feel really desperate right now to find a new place to live, you do still need to settle into the idea that it's going to take some time. And once you find a visa, of course, I think Italy is a brilliant place to live. I think that if you have the opportunity to move abroad at any time in your life, regardless of the circumstances, I think it's a good idea and a good choice, because not only will it open your mind and experiences to so many new things, it almost is humbling and grounding to move to a foreign country and be the foreigner in the new country. And you will see things and push yourself to limits that you really didn't realize you had. And it's all for the good usually, but it does take some time. So if the idea of moving abroad and moving to Italy is on your list, then I suggest you start by learning as much as you can about what life is like here, where the best place is to live, because it's a big country and there's lots of different choices, and whether or not you need to work or what you want to do when you're here. So start investigating those visas. And we do have a free visa guidebook that you can download on our website. Just go to smartmoveitaly.com and click on visas, and you'll see the link there to download that. So you can start there and see which one fits you best. Good luck. Well, that's all for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about visas, citizenship, property, and, well, really anything about moving to Italy that you would like me to answer in an upcoming episode, please feel free to send us a voicemail at our website at smartmoveitaly.com/podcast, or just click on the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can find all of the resources and the links to the people and the places that I mentioned in this episode inside the show notes. Ciao for now. A New Life in Italy podcast is a production of Sentire Media, created and hosted by me, Samantha Wilson. Production by London Nero, and with special thanks to Ali Frothingham, Sofia Pisana, and the entire team at Sentire. Follow A New Life in Italy wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're thinking of moving to Italy, whether full-time, part-time, or for a lifetime, come and see me over at smartmoveitaly.com, and we'll help you get here and start living your best life. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please rate and leave a review. It's much appreciated. I can't wait to meet up with you again next week, same time, same place. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.